It was late, almost closing time, and only one customer waited at the counter for his order. Everything seemed normal, until two suspects entered the establishment. The man, wearing a black helmet, pulled out a gun and announced a robbery. Beside him, a woman in a red helmet assisted in the crime. The customer in the red shirt handed over his phone without resistance. The employees stayed calm as the pair demanded cash and valuables. Amid the tension, one worker quickly hid her own phone under the counter to keep it from being taken. Moments later, the situation changed completely. The man in red disappeared from the camera's view, but it was all part of the plan. He was actually an undercover police officer. At the right moment, he reacted with precision and neutralized the armed suspect. The female accomplice panicked, grabbed a bag, and fled the scene, leaving her partner behind. Soon after, backup arrived. The injured assailant did not survive, and the woman remains on the run. Once again, a quick and courageous response from an officer prevented what could have become a tragedy.
It was still early morning when a motorcycle stopped in front of a bakery. The rider barely had time to turn off the engine before the calm was broken. Suddenly, two other motorcycles approach, three suspects on board. They spot the victim's headlight and decide to act. They ride up onto the sidewalk, surround the man, and announce a robbery. But the target wasn't just anyone. It was an off-duty police officer. With a quick and precise reaction, he takes control of the situation. One of the criminals is forced to the ground, while the other two flee, abandoning their bikes. The officer fires warning shots and realizes the group was using only a replica weapon. Soon after, a search operation begins in the area. The fugitives are located and arrested. The third suspect, who was injured, is also detained after receiving medical care. Another failed robbery attempt? Another example that vigilance and training make all the difference, even off-duty.
It was still early when two motorcycles pulled up side by side on a busy street. The target, an ordinary rider, unaware of what was about to happen. The passenger got off, armed, and announced the robbery, just another attempted theft on the streets of Rio. But what the criminals didn't know was that their target was actually a police officer. Calm and composed, he stopped the bike, stepped off quickly, and backed away a few steps. Then, he took cover behind a tree and reacted. The shootout was quick. The suspects fired, but the bullets hit the window of a parked car instead. Residents and pedestrians panicked at the sound and rushed to take cover. Wounded, the criminals abandoned their bikes and fled stumbling. Security cameras captured the escape. One fell, got up limping, and kept running. The other dropped his helmet and sprinted down the sidewalk. Hours later, both showed up at local hospitals, trying to hide their injuries. They were recognized and arrested on the spot. The officer was unharmed. Another case that proves those who choose a life of crime will eventually end up behind bars.
Suddenly, a man wearing an orange jacket enters the location, draws a gun, and announces a robbery. The criminal did not expect such an immediate response. One of the employees, sitting on the left, was an off-duty police officer. Without hesitation, he draws his weapon and fires at the assailant. Wounded, the robber flees, while another armed off-duty officer gets up and pursues him. The chase ends a few minutes later. The suspect, already injured, did not survive his wounds and died hours after the failed robbery attempt. The quick action and training of the officers prevented a tragedy, keeping innocent lives safe and highlighting the risks law enforcement faces even when off-duty.
In the video,
A motorcycle with two riders approaches while a man walks alone in the opposite direction, wearing a backpack and headphones, unaware of the danger. Suddenly, the motorcycle pulls alongside the pedestrian. The passenger points a gun and announces a robbery. What the criminals didn't know was that their target was an off-duty police officer on his way to work. Calmly and with precision, the officer pretends to hand over his phone with his left hand while drawing his weapon with his right. Within seconds, shots are fired, hitting both assailants. One falls to the ground, still firing, while the other, wounded in the gluteal region, staggers to his feet and flees, leaving his belongings behind. The officer remains unharmed, approaches the downed suspect, and secures the scene. The quick action prevented a robbery that could have ended in tragedy. Two criminals were neutralized, one taken into custody at a hospital, the other remains at large. Once again, crime strikes from the shadows, but meets resistance from those prepared to protect and serve.
Late afternoon, bright sun, and traffic flowing normally. A motorcyclist rides calmly on his powerful bike, while a camera attached to his helmet records every move. Suddenly, something catches his attention in the rearview mirror. A motorcycle with two men approaches at high speed. They pull alongside, brandish a gun, and announce the robbery. The victim is ordered to stop. The motorcyclist pretends to comply, slows down, and pulls over. But he quickly changes his stance, brakes sharply, gets off, and runs away. What the criminals didn't know was that the target was an undercover police officer. The officer reacts swiftly, fires warning shots, and the criminals flee in panic. According to residents, the suspects had already been committing robberies in the area, but this time, the crime didn't succeed.
The clock shows 5:20 a.m. A car reverses into the garage. The street is quiet, only a resident walking his dog, who soon goes back inside. Everything seems normal until something unusual happens. The driver turns off the headlights. Moments later, a motorcycle speeds in. The two riders stop abruptly near the garage. The passenger makes a suspicious move, revealing himself as a criminal ready to act. Without even getting off the bike, the thug points a rusty tool at the driver, who had just returned from work. Their target? The car, and anything else they could take. But what they didn't know is that the man behind the wheel was a police officer, coming home after his shift. In seconds, what could have been a robbery turns into a frantic escape. The biker accelerates away. The accomplice runs in another direction, abandoning his partner. The officer reacts, fires warning shots, and drives the criminals off. The robbery fails. Quick action prevented the worst. Reminder: a police officer is always alert, in uniform or not, 24 hours a day. In the end, crime doesn't pay.
Security cameras capture the moment a criminal passes in front of the gas station. Seconds later, he returns, this time accompanied by two accomplices on another motorcycle. The victim, an apparently ordinary man, is standing by his bike storage box. What the criminals didn't know is that he was an off-duty police officer who quickly draws his weapon upon noticing the threat. In the footage, one of the criminals, wearing a delivery backpack, aims his gun while the other two approach, but the officer is ready. The confrontation begins. The robber fires, and the officer takes cover behind his motorcycle, returning fire immediately. A true shootout unfolds at the gas station. During the escape, the passenger falls and limps away. Hours later, two criminals were found injured in local hospitals, and the third was captured on a nearby street.
A black car had just parked, followed quickly by a silver vehicle. Within seconds, a man exits carrying a gun and announces a robbery, surprising the victim who was still inside the car. A passerby notices the suspicious activity and quickly runs away. Soon, another criminal appears, surrounding the victim, who steps out of the car with hands raised, showing that they are not a police officer. Tension rises as a third suspect arrives, pressuring the victim for valuables and personal information. But the situation changes quickly. The assailants decide to flee and get into their vehicle to escape. At that moment, the woman who had stepped away earlier notices what is happening and immediately calls the police. Within minutes, officers intercept the suspects as they attempt to escape. All 4 criminals are arrested, and the victim's belongings are recovered. The swift action of both the public and authorities ensured a safe outcome.
It was around 9 o'clock at night. Security cameras captured 2 motorcycles on the street. On one of them, 2 armed men. They approach and block the path of another rider. The robbery begins. The victim, a worker, raises his hands and follows the criminal's orders. While the passenger searches him, another motorcycle passes by and speeds away after noticing the crime. But the plan goes wrong. The thief tries to escape with the stolen bike, a heavy, high-powered machine, but loses control. The motorcycle falls once, then again. At that moment, the victim notices the weapon drop to the ground. He reacts. A struggle breaks out between the two. The victim manages to get up, grabs the gun, and fires. The robber is hit and falls. The accomplice, frightened, flees and abandons his own motorcycle just a few meters away. When police arrive, the situation is already under control. The suspect didn't survive. Another case that shows how crime keeps meeting resistance, and that once again, crime does not pay.